My name is David. I want to talk to you today about science. You see, science is the method which uses observation and experimentation to try to understand reality. And I think we have some major problems with science today. Look, I'm going to be real honest with you. I'm against a lot of what's called science today. I'm a Christian. I'm a Bible teacher. I'm a young earth creationist. Ooh.
Look at him. He is so stupid. He is not a scientist. You should not listen to him and call him names in the comments. This will prove your intellectual superiority.
But we really have to answer a couple of scientific questions before you can even consider evolution to be science. Let me explain. Your average organism, any kind of a creature out there, it has its genome or its DNA. That's the information that's required to build the creature, to make all the proteins, to do all the functions in all of the cells. Okay, that is an awful lot of information. It's coded in bases, or what we could call them letters in the DNA double helix. The smallest one we know of is a bacterial parasite. But that's not even really fair, because that bacterial parasite uses its host to make some of its proteins and some of its things, so it's not truly a completely self-sufficient life form. However, it has 580,000 bases. That's 580,000 letters. That's a lot more than your average novel. The human genome, on the other hand, has about 3 billion bases, or letters. If you were to print that in an average-sized Bible, that would take about 850 of them to have just one copy of the human genome. One copy. A copy, by the way, that's in every single one of your cells. This is by no means the largest genome that we know of either. How do you go from a molecule to a man? How do you add information to the genome of an organism? Look, I don't even think you could get this with natural processes. How is random chance going to form something as complicated as a single cell? But that's chemical evolution, and we'll have to save that for another video. What I want to discuss here is genetics. How do you go from a single cell organism to a human being? Evolution claims that there's two processes that do this. That's mutation and natural selection. You're probably pretty familiar with both terms. But what are they? Scientists like to act like things are deep and mysterious, that things are too complicated to explain, when they're really not. Natural selection is the exact same thing as artificial selection. When a farmer breeds a cow to have bigger offspring, or when a breeder breeds a dog to have smaller offspring, it's the exact same process, except instead of a human intelligence breeding for the change, the trait that they're wanting, it's the environment that's killing off those that don't make the grade, that don't have the trait that helps them survive in that place. Long-haired dogs aren't going to do very well in the Sahara. Okay, while the tundra is not a good place for a short-haired dog. The environments of the world are what push these creatures to differentiation, to looking different. Just like a breeder pushes, one dog to be short and small, another dog to be extremely tall and huge. The difference between a Chihuahua and a Great Dane is the exact same thing going on when you're taking a look at natural selection. The first thing natural selection does is called genetic drift. That's when a trait in a population moves in frequency. For instance, you have 20% with brown hair, and then you get 25% with brown hair. It's evolution! Evolution! Everything is evolving! Not so much. The most famous example of this is the Galapagos finches. The beak size changes. They get bigger and bigger and bigger. Then they get smaller and smaller and smaller. But nothing really changes. There's no genetic information added. Both beak sizes were already in the population. Natural selection can do another thing. Sometimes an environment is very harsh. It doesn't fit the organism very well. The organism just isn't going to thrive here. And something needs to adapt. Either the organism needs to leave the environment completely, or it needs to adapt to its new environment. Natural selection is what does this. Natural selection allows the adaptation. But you see, there's a cost. The organism is now perfectly adapted to its environment. It fits in great. It thrives here. But there was a cost. You see, in order for it to do this, natural selection removed genetic information. It got rid of it. This genetic information is no longer in the organism. So it doesn't add information, it gets rid of it. This process in natural selection is how you get blind cavefish, antibiotic-resistant bacteria, flightless beetles on windy islands. By removing a function, you're able to keep the organism perfectly adapted to its environment, or pretty darn close. The problem is that when you remove information, it's gone. Those organisms no longer have the genetic information that they once did. The blind cavefish are never going to have the genetic information for sight. It's just not going to happen. That has been removed from their genome. And there's no way that natural selection can get from a molecule to a man without adding information. You can't take information out of this and get this. So as natural selection is a way of dealing with molecules to man evolution, it's a total bust. A mutation is a change in the genetic code. Something is added, something is subtracted, letters are moved around, those kinds of things. And that can create new genetic information. I mean, we could add things to this. So we could add random letters to this, and we would have some new information. I mean, we created a new word here. But we also destroyed information. This sentence no longer makes any sense. The fact that we have stobi xor note kta b doesn't tell us anything. There's no information here. We gained some information, but we also lost it. And the information that we gained makes no sense in context. Basically, every mutation that's ever been observed, every mutation that fits observational science, has destroyed genetic information. Mutations happen all the time, and for the most part, the cell repairs a lot of the damage. The cell has 2 copies of the DNA, and it can tell which is good information and which is bad information. The problem is that these things persist in the cell, and these genetic traits, these mutations, are passed on to the next generation. And they have mutations every time their cells divide, and then their children do, and their children do. Time after time after time, we do not see information going up in the genome. We see that that is being stripped out and destroyed through the process of genetic entropy. And this is a big problem. It's a very serious problem because this is why we die. Your cells age because the genetic information in them has become so bad your cell can't read it anymore. Evolution has been looking for the mutation that adds information to the genetic code of an organism, and they haven't found it. And it's not for lack of wanting it. They need it. They need us to believe that something that's never been observed has occurred billions and billions of times for every organism that exists. How we went from a single cell to all the variety in the world was this process of mutations adding genetic code, giving lizards wings, giving fish lungs, giving bats echolocation. I mean, we're giving these organisms new traits that didn't exist before from these mutations. How do you make a copy mistake that adds information? It doesn't make sense. But what we do observe in science is that loads and loads of mutations, thousands, in every one of us, are slowly killing us, are destroying genetic information constantly. This is the exact opposite of what evolution requires. It begins to make it look like what we have is a very good design that is slowly wearing down over time in our genetic code, rather than a flawed, pathetic design that is slowly improving. Because every day in science, we can observe the decay. What we don't observe is any new information added. I hope you see my problem. Natural selection and mutation just do not add information to the genome of an organism. And observation is what science is all about. We've never observed it. I'm going to need 3 questions answered before I even consider evolutionary biology to be a science, or before anyone should. What natural process adds genetic information to the genome of an organism? 2, why has this process never been observed, although in order for evolution to be true, it has to have happened untold billions of times? And 3, how do you overcome a problem like genetic entropy? How do you face the fact that our genetic code is wearing down, is getting more and more problems with every generation? How are we evolving to a higher level when every day we're slipping from where we were? I hope I gave you something to think about. God bless your day.